Inshallah, we're gonna now make a start of the third session, which will be all the way until the Maghrib Salah, and thereafterwards we will then make a start on the fourth and final session, which will be after Maghrib all the way up to, I was going to say Isha, but actually it's 5:30. So we got a couple of hours left, inshallah. So inshallah should be sufficient enough time to finish up the course book which we have in front of us. Now the next section which we are going to start, if we have a look at the course book, page 9, is what a wife can do, or the options given to the wife when it comes to if the husband refuses to divorce her. So just say, for example, the husband is not fulfilling his wife's rights, is not having intercourse with her, is not providing for her, is not paying for the bills. The wife, in other words, is doing everything. She's working, she's paying for the bills, she's looking after the children, she's doing the household chores. Husband is doing nothing at all. And on top of that, the husband is getting violent, he's getting abusive. It could be verbal abuse in terms of always, constantly swearing at his wife. Sometimes physical abuse in terms of hitting her. Those kind of things. So obviously parents have got involved. They've tried to reconcile between the husband and wife, as I was explaining right at the very beginning, but it's not working. So therefore, the other option is, the final option is that the husband does the decent thing and he says to his wife, you know what, we've gone through a lot, it's not working out, I'm getting mad at you all the time, I'm getting abusive at you, let's just go our separate way. Yeah, let's go our separate way. But the husband is not divorcing his wife. So decent thing would be, the manly thing at that time would be just to divorce his wife, but he isn't. He's still playing a bit of game here, a game of cat and mouse in terms of, yeah, I'll see about it, I'll give you 2 months, I'll think about it, let's wait another few weeks and then I'll see. And the next thing you know, 6 months, a year, 18 months have passed, and the husband hasn't given his wife talaq and is refusing to divorce her. So in that situation, what can a wife do? So obviously we're going to look at that the wife's got the option of khula, and also later on we're going to be touching on the Islamic Sharia Council. But before we move forward and look at khula, there are two words or two topics which are in front of you on the presentation, not on the actual course book itself. Two types of talaq which I just want to highlight, two ways of giving talaq or divorce which I want to mention. One is called takhyir talaq, takhyir, and the Arabic of it will be ta, kha, ya and ra, takhyir. And takhyir talaq basically means is where the husband gives his wife a choice of talaq and divorce. So in other words, the husband may say to his wife that, here, I've given you the choice of talaq and divorce. So you call that takhyir talaq. So what could happen is that the discussion is going on. So the husband says to his wife, okay, I've given you the choice to divorce yourself. Takhyir talaq. And then there's the second one, which is actually used quite a lot, and a lot of brothers and sisters ask this particular question. Is in Arabic is known as tafweed talaq, tafweed, which is spelled as ta, fa, waw, ya, dwat, tafweed. And tafweed basically means the wife-to-be makes a condition at the time of marriage that she will only marry him as long as she is able to enforce the divorce whenever she wishes to do so. In other words, she wants the right to divorce. So she gets married and she says to the husband-to-be that I'll get married to you, but the condition is that I want the right to divorce. In other words, I will decide when to end the marriage. I will decide when to break the marriage up. And what happens? The husband-to-be accepts this, then this will be correct. And in other words, what normally happens is like what we call clauses in marriage. That's what it's like, a clause. It happens a lot where basically the wife will get married and she'll say to the husband, okay, I'll marry you, but I want the right to divorce. And to tell the truth, do you know when this normally happens is when a girl brought up in this country goes to Pakistan, Bangladesh, she's kind of getting married, and everybody knows, or probably the girl herself knows, the guy probably himself also kind of has indicated that, look, I'm just getting married to you for the red passport. I just want to get the visa here. So then what happens is that the wife then, saying, okay, he doesn't really want to get married to me. He wants to get married to me because he wants the visa, he wants the British passport. And the wife or the girl is just getting married because her parents are forcing her. Like a classic example, like cousin brother, she's being forced to marry her, and so on and so forth. So what the wife does is that she goes, okay, I'm not, just to make my parents happy, I'll just marry him. He happens to be my cousin brother at the same time. So I'll just marry him, but I know he has no interest in me, and I know that I have no interest in him. So the way to get around it is sometimes the girl will then place a clause in the marriage and say, okay, I'll marry you, but condition is that when you do get the passport, or whenever you get the visa, whatever, then I want to end the marriage. I want to basically terminate the marriage. If the husband accepts this, obviously it's written down on paper, then this is correct, i.e. this is allowed as well. Okay, so this is one way, obviously, for sisters in particular, who may be put into this situation where in the future your parents may kind of force you to go abroad and get married, and you don't want to really obviously I don't want to get bogged down about the topic of forced marriages here. If it was a Fiqh of marriage course, then I would have gone into more detail. But sometimes it happens through force. The girl has to marry someone. So what she can do to get out of the situation is that, okay, give me the option of divorce. In other words, when you do come over and you're settled and you get the visa, you get the passport, then I will then separate. Because sometimes what could then happen is that because when he gets the visa or the passport, the husband, because he doesn't like her, but at the same time he doesn't want to divorce her, so he's then off getting a second wife, a third wife, a mistress, girlfriend, whatever, whereas the wife who he has no interest in is basically stuck in that marriage. So what she can do is that she can actually put a clause in the marriage and say that, okay, I'll get married to you, but the condition is that I have the option of divorce and talaq. So that's a couple of ways of getting around it. Obviously for sisters to have the right of divorce and talaq. Now moving along to the next slide, and also to the handout as well. Another option, and I'm not going to go into detail, on the next page, page 10, it goes into detail about the dowry and the mahar and so on. I don't want to go into too detail because obviously we don't have that much time as well. But basically what I'm just going to explain in this section of khula is that khula is a kind of like agreement where the husband and wife decide and come to an agreement of cancelling the marriage. Okay, so husband and wife, the husband is refusing to divorce his wife. The wife really wants to get out of the marriage because husband not putting in any effort or any commitments in the marriage, so the wife wants to move along with her own life. Or just say, for example, they're at a crossroad in their marriage where husband probably just say moved out of the house and he's living separately, but he's not divorcing his wife. The wife is kind of getting old, so if she wants to marry again the second time, then that is basically the time. Because obviously with men even, or with women, when they reach a certain age, it's difficult for them to find anyone. So just say the wife just close to 30s, whatever, and she's in a kind of marriage, or the husband has walked out, but he hasn't given a talaq or divorce. They're like living in separate houses. They don't really get along together. They don't really talk to each other. So the wife, what she can do is that she can ask the husband to dissolve the contract of marriage. And I mentioned there, in exchange for the compensation paid by the wife. In other words, do you know the dowry the husband gave to his wife? What the wife could say to the husband is that, look, you gave me, say, £5,000 dowry. I'll return the dowry back. I'll return the £5,000 back, but give me a divorce. Give me a talaq, give me a divorce. So what you've done is that you're basically tempting the husband to divorce you financially. Because when you look at it, if a husband has given his wife, say, £5,000 mahar and dowry, the husband may be thinking, you know what, I don't have enough money to then, go for a second marriage. So because of that reason, I might as well just stay with this particular wife. So what the wife did was that she says to the husband that, look, we're not getting along together. What I'll do is that I know you're short of money and you want some money, some dowry, so that you can get married to another wife. So what I'll do is that the dowry which you gave me, I'll give that back to you, but just give me a divorce, give me a talaq, so that we can go our separate ways. So that in a nutshell is khula. Khula, which means like a cancellation of the marriage, but it's the cancellation in such a way that the wife is giving something back to the husband. Either she's giving or returning the dowry or the mahar, or if not the dowry or the mahar, then the very least the wife may be giving something else back. It could be so that the husband bought some jewelry, some necklaces, gold necklaces, expensive items for the wife, necklaces, gold rings, bangles, earrings, whatever, very expensive. So the wife says to her husband, what, I'll give all the jewelry back, just give me a divorce. So obviously you need to tempt. Sometimes, like it happens in this world as well, that people, they're not willing to sell things, but when you tempt them with a bit more extra cash, just say they've got a nice mobile phone, you want to buy that, but they're not willing to budge. So what you do is that you tempt them with a good deal, where you say to them, okay, I'll pay you £200 for that mobile phone, which may be worth only £100, you pay double. So then they start thinking and think, okay, it's a good deal, I'll sell that phone for £200. So exactly here, when it comes to the cancellation of the marriage, that the husband may not be willing to divorce, but if the wife could tempt him, either by returning the dowry, or the very least something which the wife gave her, such as jewelries, gold rings, gold necklaces, gold earrings, so on and so forth, and the wife is willing to return that back in exchange for a talaq and divorce, then that is allowed, that is permissible. So that in a nutshell is what a khula is. Also the next page, which we're not going to go into detail, just goes into a bit more detail about the, like if it's the husband's fault in particular, then he should not ask for the dowry back. But obviously if it's the wife's fault, then it's not permissible for the husband to take anything extra and so on. So we've kind of mentioned that on the next page. Now this then takes us on to the next section, and also the next slide, about the Islamic Sharia Council. So that's like one option, khula. And remember, for khula to work, you need agreement from both the husband and the wife. So the husband has to agree, and also the wife has to agree as well. The other option is the Islamic Sharia Council. Now the way this one works, because remember, for khula to occur, you need agreement from both parties. You need the husband to say, yes, okay, I agree, and also the wife as well. But sometimes what happens is that, as I said, the husband may be, obviously he's using talaq or the right of talaq as a kind of tool to basically play around with his wife. He knows how desperate his wife is for a divorce. So what does the husband do is that he says, okay, yeah, I'll think about it. I'll let you know next week whether I want to give you divorce or not. The wife may have said to the husband, I'll return all the gifts back to you. Give me a divorce. The husband may turn around and say, okay, I'll let you know next week. Sometimes, unfortunately, what happens is that when somebody has power or authority, they kind of misuse it. They misuse that power. And they use it to kind of abuse people. So exactly as well, that the husband knows that his wife's desperate for a divorce. So what he's playing some kind of game. He's saying, okay, come to me next week, or come to me 2 weeks time. Or like, for example, when the wife tries to contact her husband via email or text or a phone call, the husband ignores the call. So many things, and sometimes you can imagine that it'll drive the wife mad, and he does sometimes. It drives her mad. Like, she wants a separation, the husband knows she wants it, but he's not giving it to her. So he's like playing playing a game with her, saying, okay, well, come on. Because I know some cases where the husband will say to the wife, yeah, okay, come and meet me at such a time, such a place. So the wife will go there, the husband won't turn up. So sometimes, like, it'll be on a day, again, the husband won't turn up, the husband won't be there. So he'll kind of delay. It's like a delaying tactic. So if that happens, constantly happening, 6 months have passed, a year has passed, then what can that sister do is that she can go to an Islamic Sharia council where there has to be at least 3 people, 3 knowledgeable people, i.e. preferable 3 muftis, 3 scholars who are experts in the field of talaq and divorce. Because what we've studied today in the Fiqh of Talaaq, to tell the truth, is actually a really watered down version. I've tried to water it down as much as possible. I think some are thinking, no, that's too difficult, but actually it is a watered down version. Talaq rules are very, very difficult. It's actually in the hadith that there are 3 rules which are very difficult, 3 aspects of our deen which are very difficult. They are talaq rules, hajj rules, and number 3, inheritance rules. Hajj, talaq and mirath. These are very difficult. Those who have been for hajj will know that hajj is also very difficult rules to remember, all the rules and what to do, Mina, Arafah, Muzdalifah, all these places, when to start the pelting, so on and so forth. So hajj rules are difficult, inheritance rules are difficult, and also talaq rules are difficult. So the 3 people who are sitting in the Sharia council, think of a Sharia council to be like a smaller kind of magistrate's court. So there's 3 people there. They are well versed when it comes to laws on marriage and talaq and divorce. And what happens is that a case will come to them. And what they will do is that they will evaluate the request of the wife that she wants a cancellation of the marriage. They will evaluate it, and they will see that whether she has a right to cancel the marriage or not. So now I mentioned 12 reasons. Again, we're not going to go over every single one of them, but 12 reasons where a wife can actually go to a Sharia council, and the Sharia council will accept her reasons if it's for one of these 12 reasons. I mentioned some of them, like husband unwilling to maintain his wife, oppresses the wife, husband is insane, these kind of things, becomes apostate, a murtad, these kind of things. Husband is missing completely, he's run away, no one knows where he is, he's lost contact with the wife. So in all those situations, the Islamic Sharia Council, the three scholars who are on board, they will listen to her case, and what they will do is that they will then try to make contact with the husband. So they'll try to get contact with the husband. Obviously, after trying, if the husband obviously responds, then obviously they'll ask the husband, okay, this complaint from your wife, what do you say? And then if they can reconcile between the two, because remember, I'll just make this clear, and I said this right at the beginning as well, even an Islamic Sharia Council, the three scholars who are on board, their job is not to give a judgment of talaq and divorce. Again, like I explained at the beginning, they should also try to reconcile as well. So obviously they contact the husband. If he's willing to respond, and he responds and he comes for a meeting, what they should do is that they should try to settle the differences. If, say, for example, the husband doesn't want to listen, he doesn't want to know, nowadays, then husbands in particular, they won't be that bothered about speaking to a scholar or a mufti, whatever. They don't want to know them. So most likely what he may do is he may say, you know what, I don't want to speak to them. So he'll ignore all the calls, all the responses, all the kind of offers made by the Islamic Sharia Council to get in contact with him. He ignores all of them. He ignores every single one of them. Thereafterwards, what will happen is that when the Islamic Sharia Council derive that, look, the husband's not really willing to get into dialogue with them, what they will do is that they will then cancel the marriage. So the Islamic Sharia Council will then kind of cancel the marriage between the husband and wife. And the wife, after she passes her iddah and her waiting period, would be allowed to marry whoever she wants. So that is what Islamic Sharia Council do. There's three of them on board. They'll listen to the wife's request. Obviously, the reason why I'm giving examples of wife, because obviously it doesn't really matter from a husband, because if he wants a divorce, he can just say talaq to her and then it's all okay, it's all done. But they'll listen to the wife, hear what she says, try to make contact with the husband. If he's willing to respond, then try to reconcile between the two, mediate between the two, and if that doesn't work, then they will then cancel the marriage, and after the wife's waiting period, the wife will be allowed and free to marry whoever she wants. Now, I'll be clear, is the process which I mentioned of a Sharia Council, that is the sunnah, well not sunnah, but that is the process which should be done by them. They hear the girl, they listen to her reasons. After that, then they will try to contact the husband, try to reconcile. If it doesn't work out, or the husband not willing to listen, then cancel the marriage. Unfortunately, what happens nowadays is that we have many Islamic Sharia councils. The same way, unfortunately, we have many mosques nowadays. Just like around the corner, there's always so many mosques. Similarly, there are many Islamic Sharia councils. Around the corner, you just find a Sharia council. And many people who sit on these Sharia councils, they've got the names Islamic Sharia Council outside, but the people who sit on the board, hardly any one of them is a scholar or an alim. Forget about him being a mufti. He's not even a scholar or an alim sitting on the board. So just like literally solicitors, lawyers, doctors. Now you tell me, what's a doctor got to do with rules of talaq and divorce? Anyway, there'll be a doctor sitting there, or solicitors just sitting there, or sometimes literally any Tom, Dick and Harry will be just sitting there on these Sharia councils. And unfortunately what happens is that very few of them go through the process which I just mentioned to you in outline, in terms of what happens. Some of them I know that what happens is that a sister will write in or will request a cancellation of the marriage. So the sister will cite, okay, I want a cancellation of a marriage because husband's being abusive to me. Now instead of hearing the husband's side of the story, without even contacting the husband, okay, fair enough, you tried to contact him and he wasn't answering, that's different. But without contacting the husband, they will say, okay, he did that to you. Straight away, they will cancel the marriage. So the sister will get a cancellation. She'll pass her 3 menstruation cycle, the iddah, and she'll go and marry someone else when technically that's wrong. So what I'm trying to say is that, because unfortunately what happens, sometimes there may be some small issues between the husband and wife. Wife probably got a bit angry or upset. So she contacts the Islamic Sharia Council, and what they do is that they straight away cancel the marriage. Now you may be thinking to yourself, what's so big deal about that? Why am I having a go at them for? They don't realize that cancelling someone's marriage just like that, the pain it causes the other party. Once a brother came to me, he was like crying. He was like heartbroken that a Sharia council, without asking him, without even trying to contact him, cancelled his marriage between him and his wife. And I think he had a young son as well. So without contacting him, something happened. Obviously, sometimes it happens between husband and wife. There's an argument, so on. Obviously, that particular argument kind of escalated, and the wife just left home. She went straight to an Islamic Sharia Council. The Islamic Sharia Council, without substantiating the truth and the reality, just straight away issued a separation. And then what happened? The wife just went. So sometimes it happens that these Sharia council, instead of trying to reconcile between the two, they are causing a lot of divisions within the community. And the reason why is because there are hardly any knowledgeable people on that particular board. As mentioned, the hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that one of the signs of day of judgment will be that the juhal, i.e. the ignorant people, will be made the leaders, and they will give fatwas, they will give rulings, they will deviate others, and they themselves would be deviated. And we're seeing that now, that they're sitting on these boards, they have no knowledge at all to cancel or annul a marriage, but they cancel a marriage, and because of that reason, they themselves are deviated, and they are making others deviated as well. So it's a very big problem we have, unfortunately, in Birmingham, some places as well, where a lot of their rules or policies are totally against the Sharia. So it's very important that, first and foremost, we don't really get involved with these types of people. If anybody asks us for any Sharia councils, then there are 1 or 2 around in Birmingham who are reliable, and also there's one in Dewsbury who are also very reliable as well. But besides that, the others which are popping up all around the country, very few of them are reliable. Inshallah, I'll take some questions, because I know some brothers do have some questions about that, but inshallah I'll take it before the Maghrib Salah. Okay, now let's move on to the next topic, which is now on page 11 in the course handbook, and that is with regards to the iddah and the waiting period. Now I've mentioned there, again we're not going to go over that first paragraph on page 11 word for word, that iddah, there's so much benefits. So what is iddah? So let me just explain that first, then I'll go on to the benefit or the wisdoms. Iddah literally means to count. So iddah literally means to count. And technically, it means to spend in mourning after the demise of the husband, divorce, or at the annulment of the marriage. In other words, when a husband passes away, demise of the husband means that when the husband passes away, then to spend in mourning, or if the husband divorces his wife, then to spend in mourning and isolation, or at the annulment of the marriage. In other words, when the marriage breaks, then to have a waiting period So all these are, or that is a technical definition of iddah. So it's like a waiting period. Obviously we look at it on the next subsection, that how many days the wife should be on her waiting period for, if she has been divorced or if her husband has passed away later. But that's why in a nutshell, technically iddah and waiting period means it's like a period of mourning. And to tell the truth, this is not something which is Islamic ruling. Actually, when you look around in other cultures and in other religions, you have iddah, you have a waiting period. Hindus, their waiting period is such that in some castes, Hindu castes, when the husband passes away, the wife has to be cremated with the husband. In some Hindu castes, when the husband, as you know, when he passes away, they cremate his body. The wife also has to be cremated with him as well. And in some other Hindu traditions, it's mentioned that the wife is not allowed to marry again. Is not allowed to marry again at all. So when her husband passes away, the wife can't marry anyone at all. And unfortunately, we kind of see this belief within our Indian subcontinent culture, where sometimes when a husband passes away, just say he passed away at a young age, or just say his wife's quite young when he passed away, just say she's in her 30s, people will say to that woman, or the incorrect notion of belief is that that woman is not allowed to marry anyone at all. So she's not allowed to marry anyone. Whereas the Sharia says that no, as soon as she finishes a waiting period, she can marry someone. You know, look at most of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's wives, they were either divorcees or widows. So it's not like haram for a Muslim woman when her husband passes away that she marries another man. There's nothing wrong with that. Because if it was something gross or something indecent, then why did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say marry Hazrat Khadija anha? She was a divorcee of, so not divorcee, a widow of 2 husbands before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam married her. So what I'm trying to say is that it's not something new, but in fact it's actually found in the Hindu traditions as well, in the Hindu culture, that a woman, when her husband passes away, the woman has to go through a waiting period. And even in Arabia, before the intervention of Islam, a woman, she would also observe iddah, but her iddah and waiting period was for 1 year. Nowadays the women is 4 months, 10 days? But for women in those days, it was for 1 year. And not only that, during that 1 year, she wasn't allowed to take a bath. We look at it, obviously the Muslim women, they're allowed to take a bath during their iddah and waiting period. But in those days, when a woman would be on an iddah, she wasn't allowed to take a bath for a year. Imagine a few days when we don't have a shower or a bath, we feel so sticky and so uncomfortable. You can imagine if you haven't taken a bath for a year, how sticky and uncomfortable that particular woman would be feeling. But they'll put her through hell, because that's how they treated women in those days. But anyway, so what I'm trying to say, it's not like a new phenomenon. It's not something like new Islam has invented. It's something which is found in other traditions and in other cultures as well. And I mentioned some kind of benefits of why there needs to be iddah waiting period. If we could just have a look at, again, page 11, the last point or the last paragraph of iddah, which is something new. Now it's written there that it is not necessary that iddah is only obligatory if the husband has consummated the marriage. If the husband and wife had khalwa sahiha, i.e. they were together at a private place without any apprehension of interference by someone, and there was nothing to prevent them from having sexual intercourse, this type of privacy, khalwa sahiha, carries the same legal consequences as actual intercourse. Okay, now let me explain what I mean by that. If a husband, say for example, has divorced his wife, there has to have been intercourse beforehand. So basically the husband has had intercourse, and just say for example he then divorces his wife, then the wife would have to go through a waiting period. Yep. Now I've also mentioned there that actual intercourse is not necessary. It's not necessary that there was actually physical and actual intercourse between the husband and wife for iddah and waiting period to be necessary. As I mentioned there, that if there is what we call in Arabic khalwa sahiha, which means that the husband and wife were together alone in a room, that if they wanted to have intercourse, they could have. If they wanted to have intercourse, they could have, but for other reasons or tiredness, whatever, he decided not to. So even in that situation, there is a waiting period for that woman if she is then divorced thereafter. Okay, now I'll just give you an example. Unfortunately, you hear some really sad stories when it comes to marriage and how marriages end. So sometimes what happens is that, got an email a couple of years back, husband, wife, they got married, and then on the first day, before they could even be alone together, husband found out about his wife, something about his wife in terms of she had a boyfriend, she was seeing someone else. So before they even had that first night or the first night relationship, husband found out, the marriage was done, a couple of hours later he found out that something happened or about his wife's past and he wasn't happy with, and he was very upset, you could imagine. So what he did was that he gave a talaq and divorced his wife straight away. Now look, they got married, so they may have been together, like say at a wedding hall, but there were other men there, so obviously they weren't together privately, were they? Then the husband divorced his wife. So in that situation, the wife now doesn't have to go through a waiting period. The wife doesn't have to go through a waiting period, because waiting period, iddah, is only necessary, I think I may have mentioned there, if there has been intercourse or something similar like private seclusion between the two. If they got married and there was no kind of intercourse between the two, and nor was there private seclusion, and remember private seclusion here means that where they're alone together, that they could have had intercourse if they wanted to. So in that situation, there would be no iddah and waiting period for the wife. However, if the husband got married, on the first night, say for example, he sleeps with her, but just sleeps, there's no intercourse between the two, just sleeps. They could have had intercourse, but I know they were probably tired or something, but they just slept together. So now the next morning, just say something happened, the husband divorces his wife. So even though the husband hasn't actually had intercourse with his wife, but because they spent the night together in private seclusion the night before, they slept together in the same bed, even though there was no kind of intercourse, no touching, no kind of intimate interaction, but because they were together, sleeping together, where if they wanted to, they could have had intercourse, but he said no, or he decided not to, then in that situation, there would be iddah. There would be a waiting period if the husband then decides to divorce his wife. So then she will have to observe a iddah and a waiting period. Okay, so that's so far? Okay, so basically remember, there has to be either actual intercourse or there has to be private seclusion for iddah to be obligatory. If there is none of them, no intercourse, no private seclusion, and the husband decides to divorce his wife, then there is no iddah and waiting period for the wife in that situation. Okay? Okay, now let's move on to the next section, page 11, period of iddah. Now the next 2.5 pages or so, I mentioned some rules there. I'm not going to go over every single one of them because some of them are quite straightforward. But the next 2.5 pages is what I describe as textbook rules. Textbook rules. In other words, rules which can be found in the Hanafi fiqh books. Yeah? So from page 11 all the way up to say page 13, middle of page 13, these are all what we call textbook rules. Now what I mean by textbook rules is in terms of, this is what you'll find if you were to open up a classical Hanafi book, whether it's your Al-Hidayah, Raddul Muhtar, whatever, this is what you'll find. And inshallah we have some madrasa students, madrasa girls from Bilal Academy. So obviously for you girls it'll be very beneficial for you to obviously read that, to analyze that and to understand that. But I'll just mention some of the rules which are there, and then we'll go on to the next slide where I'll mention the modern day rules. Okay, so on the next slide on the presentation, I'll mention the modern day rules, because the beauty of the Sharia is that Sharia laws, they're not static, but they revolve, which means that according to time, they revolve. They're not static, it doesn't just stand still. It's always revolving Sharia law. So what you find here is basically the laws say 100 years ago, 200 years ago, but obviously according to time, era, culture, country, certain rules may not be applicable. So there are different set of rules which inshallah we'll look at on the handout. But let's firstly have a read of this section here. Then the next 1.5 pages I'll just say in my own words. Okay, page 11, the second subtopic is period of iddah. Now rule number 1 is that a woman has to observe iddah, are waiting period, for 4 lunar months and 10 days on the death of her husband, irrespective of whether the marriage has been consummated or not. There's an extra not here, but it should be has been consummated or not. Okay, so what does that mean? So he says here that if a husband passes away, but wife has to observe 4 months and 10 days. To the extent that, unfortunately, may Allah forbid, it's not something nice, but just say for example, husband, they got married, and just say the second day or the next day, the husband passes away. On that very day when they got married, the husband passes away. So whether there was consummation of the marriage or not, wife will have to observe 4 months and 10 days, and then if she wants to marry someone again, she can do that, but after 4 months and 10 days. Okay. Rule number 2, the waiting period of a pregnant woman. So woman who is pregnant, what is a waiting period? Now that's straightforward as well. It says here that irrespective of whether the iddah is due to death, i.e. whether her husband has passed away, divorce or any other form of separation, a woman who's pregnant, her waiting period is all the way up to the time of the delivery of the child or the miscarriage of the child. Have we got that so far? So just say if a woman is pregnant, she was just like a couple of months pregnant, her husband passes away sadly, so she'll have to wait another 7 months before she's out of her iddah waiting period. So she doesn't count 4 months and 10 days, it'll be all the way up to the delivery of the child. Just say for example, she was pregnant, 8 months pregnant, 8.5 months pregnant, she was due in the next couple of weeks, and then, may Allah forbid again, the husband passes away. So 2 weeks later she gives birth to the child, that's it, she's now out of her waiting period. She's now out of her waiting period. Even to the extent that there is a hadith sort of saying that if the husband passes away and they haven't actually done his burial yet, and the wife was pregnant and then she gives birth to the child, even then, like say half an hour later she gives birth to the child, her iddah finish, her waiting period is finished. So what I'm trying to say is that the waiting period for a woman who's pregnant is all the way up to the delivery of the child. Whether it's divorce or death of a husband, it's always delivery of the child. Rule number 3 explains that if the woman is bearing twins, her iddah, her waiting period, will only terminate when the second child is delivered. So when the second child is delivered, then that's when her iddah will finish. And then he goes on to say that if the marriage is fasid, i.e. irregular, and what I mean by irregular marriage in terms of performing nikah without witnesses or marrying 2 sisters at the same time, and the marriage has not been consummated, no iddah is necessary. But then he goes on to say that, however, if it's been consummated, then she will have to observe the waiting period for 3 menstruation cycles or 3 months. Okay, so what does that mean? He's trying to explain that. Just say a man and a woman, they got married, but it wasn't Islamically done, because as you know, for marriage to take place or for marriage to be Islamically valid, there has to be witnesses, yeah? 2 men or 1 man or 2 women. But what happened was that boy and girl, they didn't know the rules, and they just like kind of got married without witnesses, or there was only 1 man as a witness. Or just say, for example, a man, he gets married to 2 sisters at the same time. You're not allowed to marry 2 sisters from the same family, same time. Or just say he got married to a girl, and then he realizes that, you know, she's a kind of like a foster sister to me or something, or somehow related to me, that I'm not allowed to marry her. So in that situation, it says there that if they hadn't consummated the marriage, in terms of if they haven't had the intercourse, then straight away they'll be separated, obviously, but there is no waiting period. But obviously, if there has been consummation of the marriage, then, or of that relationship, I should say, then obviously what will happen is that the wife would, when she's now separated, would have to observe 3 menstruation cycles or 3 months if she is not menstruating. Okay, so that is the rule when it comes to the period of iddah and waiting period. Any questions or?
Does the waiting period still apply if it's not a nikah? Is that what you just?
Yeah. If it's not, because there was a kind of nikah here, in terms they were considered to be husband and wife. So if there was no consummation of the marriage, there's no iddah. If there was, then there will be iddah and waiting period. If it's obviously like a boyfriend girlfriend situation, adultery, obviously there's no iddah in that, because obviously that's different. Okay, just one ruling here. I just realized that it's not mentioned there. I'm not sure for what reason. But obviously, what is the waiting period? If you could write it down in the actual course book itself. The waiting period of a woman who is divorced. So, a woman who is divorced. So, what will be her waiting period? So, remember, if she is menstruating, then her waiting period will be 3 menstruation cycles, like we explained right at the beginning. Remember the examples we gave: December, January, February, March. So if a woman who's menstruating, her menstruation cycle would be, her iddah, her waiting period will be 3 menstruation cycles. So if she was divorced, like I gave the example in the morning, December the 10th, and her menstruation cycles are the first 6 days of every month. So January menstruation cycle, February, then March, and as soon as the March menstruation cycle finishes, she's now free. So that is one ruling. And then obviously a woman who's not menstruating and she's divorced, in terms of she's reached the age of menopause, say for example, which is around 55 years, and she's divorced by her husband, then her iddah waiting period will be 3 months. So I'll just recap that again. A woman who is menstruating, her waiting period will be 3 menstruation cycles, and a woman who is not menstruating, who may be on a menopause, then her menstruation cycle will be her iddah, or waiting period will be 3 months. Okay, now just as I said, the next 1.5 pages, so I'm just going to explain in my own words that during the waiting period, it's mentioned that the wife should do her iddah or her waiting period in the house which she shared with or which she stayed in with her husband. Let's say, for example, the husband and wife, they lived in Birmingham somewhere, and the wife, say for example, lives in Manchester. So the husband divorced his wife. So again, according to the textbooks, what we have here, the rule will be the wife would have to observe her waiting period, her 3 menstruation cycle, in the husband's house in Birmingham. Similarly, the next section, we're on page 12 now, maintenance during iddah, that during the waiting period, it's the husband's right, so it's a right of the Sharia as well, that the husband has to maintain his wife during the waiting period. So whether it's divorce, whether it's a death, or whatever, what will happen is that the husband would have to look after his wife in terms of financially maintain her, accommodation, rent, all these kind of things, bills, food, expenses, these kind of things have to be paid by the husband. Also, if we move on to the next page, page 13, I'll just mention some rules about mourning during iddah, that if you look at rule number 2, that when we talk about a woman is mourning, whether her husband has passed away or whether she has been given, like say 3 divorces and so on, is that she should obviously abstain from wearing fancy clothing, wearing bright colored clothing, obviously wearing plain clothing. She doesn't have to wear white, but anything which is plain. So it could be something like blue, but if it's just like plain and old, then that's okay. But what she should abstain from, as I said, is wearing really fancy clothing or jewelries and proper bling bling kind of makeup and so on. She should abstain from that. But just like normal things, then obviously normal clothing and so on, she should be allowed to do so. Obviously just to keep yourself clean and presentable, that's okay. Or if there's some pain in the eye, then during the night you can apply some surma or kuhal, that would be allowed, but not go OTT when it comes to makeup and so on. So that's with women who are mourning. And then I've also mentioned the next paragraph about women when they are in their iddah, they should remain home as much as possible in terms of try their best not to leave the home. If there is a need for them to leave, then inshallah, then they can, as I'm going to explain on the slide. But generally speaking, they should stay at home. Sometimes if it's sometimes a sister once asked that, it's my cousin's nikah, can I go to the nikah? So no, if you are in the iddah and it's you got a cousin's or a relative's nikah or marriage, you're not allowed to go there. Sometimes a woman, she may be in iddah and she asks that, or can I go to somebody's birthday party or something? So those kind of things like birthday parties, nikah and so on, she can't leave the house for that. So that in a nutshell is that the place where they do where she was living with her husband, in that particular place she will have to stay there as much as possible during the iddah and the waiting period. Now what we'll do inshallah after the salah, I'll then mention rules which are more applicable to this day and age, because what I've just mentioned there are more kind of textbook rules in terms of applies to situations in the past, may not be that applicable in this day and age. So inshallah with the the next presentation, you can see the next slide. Obviously we just leave it on during the salah time for any brothers and sisters. You could just have a read through, and inshallah I'll touch on a bit more detail. So what I'm going to show to you now after salah on this particular slide is more like the fatwa, is more like the opinion for sisters in this day and age. If any sisters have any questions, then like before, if you could just write on a piece of paper and just pass it through the dividers, and inshallah I'll answer it after Maghrib Salah. Wa akhiru da'wana.